Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. You guys broke the internet. I think that's what happened. So make sure, if you can help me out, if you could share this on Facebook and get this out, and we will just pick up where we left off. But back to making sense about the Steven Anderson and the new IFB. One of the reasons that many people were attracted to him, I believe, was because of the drama associated with him, the excitement, the Alex Jones, the Donald Trump effect. When I was younger, we used to have to spend 10, 15, 20 bucks for a Phil Kidd CD, and that was where you would find just the hard preaching against the sodomites and things like that. We used to drive 2 hours to go hear it, and when Steven Anderson came along, you could get it instantly on YouTube for free. It was great. Many preachers were backing down during that time. Many preachers were toning things down because of the negative publicity and all of those things. And so Pastor Anderson, he didn't care. He let her rip and he just doubled down. And we loved that. Many people, they loved that excitement. They loved that boldness. It was a truly enjoyable thing to watch, and it inspired a lot of people. But at the same time, too, with Phil Kidd, I used to tell my wife how I'm not sure if this, I used to wonder if he really meant the stuff he preached. And I used to admit it was more about the entertainment. But even if it wasn't just entertainment, it fired you up. It just got you excited. As Christians, we often feel like the world's against us. We feel like outsiders. We're disgusted by the things we see going on. And listen to somebody just go nuts on the world, it's always an exciting thing. And Pastor Anderson was very good at that. And so, again, some of that can be a little bit carnal. But most of us, too, even if that was what drew us to him, we also knew that there needed to be a balance there. We also understood that, hey, you don't just take everything super literally here. But with a lot of his followers, they followed everything he said to the letter. They had the biggest extremes. It was really weird, the way some of his followers are. And so I think he was the first IFB guy to really, I think, use the internet in a successful way. Another thing that drew a lot of you to Pastor Anderson, it was the Bible teaching. Without a doubt, the man was a good teacher. He is a good teacher. He used a ton of scriptures in his sermons, and you actually learn something where you could take a Bible and prove your point. Not many people in the old IFB can do that. And I mean church members. They just trust their preacher. And so new IFB people, typically, they would open a Bible and they would show you, because he was that good of a teacher. He could do that because, let's face it, I still believe most of what he preaches is biblical. And most IFB guys, they don't want to admit this, but a lot of them will privately. They've learned a lot of things from him. They all liked him where they agreed, but they hated his guts where they disagreed. And so for some, the reason they were attracted to him, it was the things he had right that so many IFB churches had wrong. People like myself, when I first came across him, I wasn't really a big fan. I didn't really like a lot of his mannerisms and things. But at the same time, I couldn't get past the Bible teaching. And he was one of the only guys I could find that wasn't teaching dispensationalism, that wasn't teaching the pre-trib rapture. He also did a very good job. He was not confusing like many when it came to the subject of repentance and many other things. He's a good Bible teacher. Nobody can take that away from him, and it's foolish to even try. And hopefully my stream will stay. It looks like it's trying to do some weird things again. But I'm going to turn off some windows too, just in case that's affecting things. But for another two, it was the soul winning. He did a very good job of successfully motivating people to soul win, teaching people to soul win. And understand too, while a lot of people in the New IFB, they think New IFB is doing all the soul winning, there are many good soul winning churches all over America. Some large churches that are doing a great work in this area. No doubt about that. But it is also a fact that it is going away in many churches. It's becoming more and more common for there to be churches that don't have any souling. And I personally think a lot of that is due to bad theology. I think a lot of the confusing teaching on salvation, repentance, what happens after someone gets saved, I think is discouraging people from soul winning. And I believe because Pastor Anderson taught it right, taught it so well, I think it motivated a lot of people to go soul winning. I will never take that away from him. I think he deserves a lot of credit there. And so another thing I think that attracted a lot of people to him, it was many of the things they were using that he was calling out in the IFB as they were using them as an excuse to get out of their church, where they were actually being pressured to live like a Christian. I think there's a good chunk of these people. They were in old IFB churches where they knew they should be there, but they were being pushed to live like godly Christians. The men were being taught to be good husbands and real leaders. They were taught to be good fathers, and they didn't like that pressure, and so it was very convenient to learn about all the things that are wrong with the old IFB, and then go and's like, you know what, I'm not compromising. If your church has a bookstore, I'm out. If your church has a Sunday school class, our kids are all going to get molested, I'm out. And they would just, if you're worshiping Israel, wrong on prophecy, I'm out. And I think a lot of people did that, even though Pastor Anderson would tell people don't leave your church because of that. But a lot of people would. They would learn facts that the old IFB had wrong, and they would use that as an excuse to get out of their church. And so these are very carnal people, a lot of them. And being a new IFB internet follower is probably one of the easiest forms of Christianity that there is. It's one where you get to be the good guy without changing your behavior in any way, shape, or form, and you have no accountability. Just show up at some soul winning marathons, share some memes about reprobates on Facebook, and just call out false prophets and everyone who says repentance in a way you don't like. And then you're super Christian while sitting at home doing nothing, and you stink. And that's a lot of people within the new IFB, and you're all over the internet right now. And you're disgusting. So for many, it was the reprobate doctrine, or all the doctrines that people felt gave them permission to feed their hate. This attracted many truly hurt and broken people who I think had been wrong, but sadly these people weren't helped to heal. They were only given an excuse for their bitterness. And so, for example, yes, there are imprecatory prayers in the Bible, but do you really need to pray as many imprecatory prayers as you do? Yes, there are reprobates. I believe in that. But does that mean everybody that you disagree with is a reprobate? Everybody you don't like is a reprobate? Yes, there is a time to hate. But guess what? It's not all the time. And some of you people, you very broken, bitter, disturbed people, were obsessed with those things. And you go into these churches and you freak people out. And we definitely had them come through our church. And so for me personally, the reason I got involved with Steven Anderson is, one, I did learn a lot from his preaching. Also, I did appreciate certain doctrine that I believed, and I still believe that he has right. I did appreciate his boldness in him taking a stand in areas where I felt the IFB was going soft. I also greatly admired his zeal for soul winning, as well as many people he inspired to go soul winning. But I was also disgusted by all the lies that were out there about him. And let me tell you, the IFB has cried wolf too many times. Just because you don't like what he teaches on the rapture and on the Jews and things doesn't mean you get to lie about him. All you're doing is you're discrediting yourself, and you're causing people to run to him. And you know what? I refuse to listen to a vast majority of the preachers who tried to tell me so, because in reality, you didn't tell me so. Because if you tell me 9 things about him that are false and you get one thing right, guess what? You were wrong way more than you were right. You didn't tell me so. Okay? When you're just throwing everything at the wall and you get one thing to stick, you just discredited yourself big time. And the reality is, when it comes to the real issues I have with them, none of you called those things out. Okay? None of you told me so on those things. And so I do believe that, Pastor Anderson is a flawed individual, but he was also one, like all of us, that I think he has a part of him that wanted to do what he believed was right. He was very passionate about it. but he also has some flesh. I think he has some severe baggage he was carrying around, and he let it get the better of him. He made some pretty big mistakes, and understand good people can make mistakes, but when they do, they still have to deal with the consequences of those mistakes. And so I don't know enough about his history and upbringing. I can't contribute to why he is the way he is, but let me just point out a few things that I know and some things I've observed when it comes to that. He is a man who does not have older preachers in his life that are mentors to him. I don't see him listening to these people, being around them, having them in his church, him being in their church. I don't see that. He was always the smartest guy in the room. And, there's some truth to that. But, there's also a danger to that, because you can be lifted up with pride. We all need those older people. And I'm thankful for the many older preachers that I have in my life. Now, and when I brought this up to him, he told me it's because the entire boomer generation sucks, is what he said. I don't believe that's the case. I think he needs to get to know more people. I think another part of his problem is he surrounded himself with sycophants and loyal lapdogs and cowards, and he didn't have any real friends. And I believe that is evident right now, for the most part. When I wrote this, I said he didn't have any real friends. He's proven to have a few friends that are telling him the right thing, but they're also getting blasted in his sermons now. Because he doesn't want real friends. He wants sycophants. He wants the loyal lapdogs. He wants the yes men. And so I believe his online popularity caused a lot of bad people to be drawn to him. The subjects that he specialized in caused some crazy people to be drawn to him. That reprobate doctrine. Even Israel. There are a lot of people that are just plain weirdos and in reality anti-Semitic. And those people, we've had them come through here. They're awful, awful people. And so, I believe the people he's surrounding himself with is a big part of the problem. And the fact, too, that he's got so many people still within his church supporting him with all these things that are going on, just shows how bad of a situation he's in, how bad of a crowd he's in. He's ran off any decent people that were in his life. And so these men, when it comes to the new IFB, just like one YouTuber, new IFBer out there defending Anderson, said he's the creator of the new IFB. For some, the new IFB, it's those who believe a set of doctrines, and so they would consider me new IFB. I don't believe that. I believe it's a people. I believe he did create the new IFB. And therefore, because you cannot separate yourself from the new IFB or you can't be a part of the new IFB without being connected to Anderson, I don't want to be a part of the new IFB. In reality, I am far more old IFB than I am new IFB. And that includes in doctrine. And let me explain why that is. Go look up the word doctrine in the Bible. Most of the time when we see that word doctrine, it's in reference to behavior. It's things that become sound doctrine, things involving behavior and how I live every day. Doctrine that affects my everyday life. I follow doctrine that I have learned and that is promoted and that is practiced in the old IFB and that is preached the best in the old IFB. The kind of husband that I am, the kind of father that I am, the kind of worker that I am, the kind of friend that I am, the kind of Christian that I am, the way I am, the way I conduct myself, everything that comes to my everyday life is from old IFB teaching, and much of that is contrary to what new IFB people are preaching, and for sure some of the things that are being promoted right now. And so who cares if I'm different on the rapture, because I still believe in being ready for Christ's return today. So me being post-trib does not affect my daily behavior in a way that's different from what I've been taught in the old IFB. My behavior is still the same. It is what they taught me. The new IFB, though, they specialize in doctrines, and they make the biggest deal, it seems like, in ones that do not affect your behavior. For example, your position on salvation. Well, that's really important when it comes to getting saved, but I got saved when I was 5 years old. And so that doesn't affect my daily life, except for in the fact it affects how I preach the gospel. But understand, my day-to-day life, most of my doctrine that affects me is old IFB. And therefore, I think it's foolish to even associate myself doctrinally with the new IFB, because doctrine is more about just a few set of facts that don't affect our behavior. No, it's about doctrine that affects our behavior. And the best teaching that you will hear, and the best teaching I have ever heard on life, Christianity, godliness, behavior, family, I got from old IFB preaching on Israel. I don't go to them to get my doctrine on dispensationalism and things like that. I go to them for doctrine involving behavior, because that's what really affects things. So hopefully my stream stays up. We're back. We're definitely having live stream trouble. I got a lot of people praying imprecatory prayers against me right now. No, so hang in there with me. So just a few things. When it comes to the new IFB, it's just kind of become a joke, a dirty joke. Many of you out there, you've left churches when Anderson declared that a pastor who doesn't have 2 children is unqualified. And yet Anderson has proven himself disqualified, but you'll ignore it because at least he's right in the gospel and not like those repent of sins people. And in my opinion, I believe, and one of the reasons I think people need to encourage him to step down, I think he went against his better judgment as a parent and how he raised his kids, because in his preaching, he's often taken the most over-the-top extreme position on everything, because that gets the clicks. That gets attention. But he also doesn't want to look like a hypocrite. So now he's practicing things that just don't seem necessary, just being over the top. And these extremes, I believe, were from a position of insecurity, because he probably didn't know what he was doing. So he's putting forth this hardcore persona to impress his followers. And we don't need to do that. That's not necessary. I am much more concerned about convincing my kids I'm a good father and my wife I'm a good husband than my internet followers and even my local church. If my kids don't think I'm a good dad, then, who cares what everybody else thinks? If I'm not a good dad, who cares what everyone else thinks? And so I did learn certain facts from Pastor Anderson. I'm thankful for those things. Said I overlooked a lot of red flags. I was hoping the new IFB was going to be a revival of the old IFB. I hoped they would be a reformation of the IFB. And I understand now, though, it never had a chance, because it started off with the same problem the old IFB ended up having. It was completely man-centered. Same old politics, new group, new faces. And so I broke fellowship with the new IFB, and I've been vocal about not being in fellowship, but I've not been vocal about why, and many have wondered why. And I got out of the new IFB because Pastor Anderson, with all his flaws, I overlooked a lot of these things because there was a lot of things I liked about him. I'm not real picky with people. I don't try to make people exactly like me. But in reality, it was because of a lot of just the people in the new IFB, the other pastors in the new IFB. I was convinced these were not good people. And I wasn't public about these things because it was based on my personal observance, things that I had personally seen. And in the new IFB, unless you have screenshots and a recorded phone conversation or something, or a video that you can upload to YouTube, then it just didn't happen and you're just railing. That's how it is in the new IFB world. But I had seen enough to know I don't want to have any part of this. And so at this point, I highly recommend just writing off anyone who continues to support this movement and the things that are being taught. And I personally don't care about any backlash that will come my way. The truth is, I have everything to gain from them attacking me. It just proves I'm not one of them. It helps those who approve of their foolishness to stay away from me and to stay away from our church. And so if Anderson was used in a positive way in your life, it's okay to be thankful for that. But your loyalty should be to him, or to Christ, not him. Okay? We only follow people as they follow Christ. And I believe Anderson is in rebellion right now. And if you stay with him, you're going to go down with him. And I hope he does the right thing and steps down. I hope he gets his act together and takes care of his family. But and this is what I wrote. I've got to update this. I wrote this a week and a half ago. But it said, in all likelihood, and I know y'all aren't going to believe me about this, but I'm just telling you the truth right now. In all likelihood, he'll preach a message making himself out to be David or Paul or even Jesus. And everyone in the new IFB will drink their Kool-Aid, feel vindicated, and go along with them. We've all seen this song and dance before. The question is, how many times are you going to go along with it? And Bruce Mejia already made him David, and I'm Shimei. Roger Jimenez already made him David. John's Absalom. And the Apostle Paul, or he already made himself the Apostle Paul yesterday when he said, my answer to those that examine me, taking a line from the Apostle Paul. It's all about himself. Oh, and by the way, I'll show you a clip later. You know, his attack is like worse than anything he's even seen in the Bible. I mean, he's all the good characters in the Bible with none of their flaws. And we're all the bad guys. Very, very fascinating stuff. And so, you know, and I have referred to new IFB people as Kool-Aid drinkers. I am guilty of that, and I don't repent of it because that's exactly how these people are acting. And so when it comes to some of the things that we've seen in the last week and a half, it's gotten very disturbing. And before I have some other pastors on to say what they want to say, I do want to read some statements that I have from Pastor Anderson's sister and brother. Because there's been a lot of talk about witnesses, and frankly, I'm very bothered and disturbed by people's response to his children and their testimonies. There's a lot of accusations about the IFB and how we handle abuse victims, and they are getting exactly what the haters all accuse us of, and probably worse than we typically get accused of. It's pretty sad, and we're going to talk about some of those things, but this is from Pastor Anderson's sister, Ronnie, and she said, in defense of Clint, Spring, and their sons, I am Stephen Anderson's older sister. Our brother Clint has not seen Steve's daughter Miriam since September 4th, when she evaded capture and went on the run. Clint cooperated with law enforcement and told them where to find her. Also, Clint and Spring were not in Miriam's hospital room claiming to be her guardians. The real story is that Clint was in the hospital parking lot with his son Dane. This is because Miriam had texted Clint to meet her there, and he thought she might return his car key before going home. At some point, Clint's son Dane spotted Steve in the waiting room, and they decided to leave rather than to have an altercation with him. Nobody in Clint's household saw or spoke with Miriam at the hospital. Spring was at home visiting with her sister Ashley, who can verify her whereabouts. I can also confirm these details because I received phone calls from both Clint and Spring during this time. I called Steve on Wednesday to set the record straight on these key facts. Steve had tracked Miriam's laptop and knew that it was at Clint's house, but that was consistent with what I had already told him about Clint calling me and asking where he should send Miriam's stuff. Her laptop and her belongings are still at Clint's house to this day. I don't even know what state she is in. Anyway, Steve made it clear in our phone call that he would make a video against Clint and give out his address if Miriam's interview was released. I told him Clint has no control over the YouTube channel, Dead Domain. I was alarmed by the doxing threat and made a phone call to Isaac, letting him know about his dad's ultimatum. Miriam's interview still came out, and Steve proceeded to make 2 videos doxing Clint and his family. Back in July, when Clint and Spring agreed to let Miriam stay at their house. Indefinitely, their sons were just bystanders living in the house, yet they were included in the doxing video. Clint is not some creepy uncle, as Steve has implied. I can vouch for Clint's character, but common sense dictates that Steve wouldn't send his daughter to spend the summer with someone he did not trust. Regardless of whose side you're on in the battle between Steve and his older kids, you need to understand that Clint and Spring got an earful while Miriam was staying with them, and they were doing what they felt was right based on what they had heard. If you watch your video and any one of John's videos, you'll have an idea of the kind of things they heard over the course of several weeks. Also, please understand that I'm not in any way refuting my sister Lisa's testimony about her observations about Steve and Juza. Lisa is my closest family member other than my husband and children, and she is stating her honest beliefs. She has expressed the same thoughts during our phone calls. However, Clint and Spring intentions are good as well. This is all I want to say for now. So that's from Pastor Anderson's sister, Ronnie. And again, say, Pastor, why are you talking about this? Well, because you know what? I don't want Pastor Anderson's brother and sister to have to go to a sodomite to get this story out. You know, somebody from their world should help them. But typically in the IFB world, again, we just ignore everything. And then when things fall apart with the individual, we don't even care. We just let them get hurt, discouraged. And then, you know, who's always waiting for them with open arms? The stinking sodomites. Every time. And, you know, we need to be there for people. And so and my wife has been in communication with Ronnie. And again, I'm I'm not just going off the interviews when it comes to my judgment that I have made. There's quite a bit more that I know about the situation than people realize. And so I have another statement here from Clint Anderson, Stephen Anderson's brother. And I do want to just go on record saying, too, I thought the doxing incident made Pastor Anderson look completely unhinged and insane, like he's spiraling out of control. I've never seen anything like that. And his sermon on Sunday morning, I mean, I believe the man needs some serious help. Where are his friends? Oh, that's right. The ones who are trying to be friends are getting blasted from the pulpit. It's those guys that got named yesterday. So let me read this statement from Clint Anderson. It says, I am issuing this statement to set the record straight on a few things and answer my brother's accusations against me and his other baseless and false claims. Earlier this year, over spring break, Miriam came to stay with us for a 2-week vacation. My wife and I picked her up at the airport, and she had been at our house for about an hour when she broke down crying and poured out her heart to my wife about the horrible verbal and physical abuse that she had endured. She also brought it up to me separately and brought it up to us on multiple occasions. So we in no way tried to turn Miriam against her parents. That narrative is completely false. Later, Miriam asked to come and stay with us for the summer, and Steve called me and arranged it. 3 of my sons were already registered to go to a well-known Christian camp here in the Carolinas at the end of June. I asked my brother if Miriam could go to the camp, and we were able to get her registered at the last minute. As Miriam and others have indicated, she evidently said something about abuse to someone at the camp because the camp counselor contacted CPS. When Steve and Juja were contacted by CPS, they became enraged at Miriam because she had evidently said something at the camp. To be clear, Miriam had zero interest in going to CPS. She was actually very panicked and stressed out about CPS being involved. Shortly after this was the 4th of July holiday. My sister Ronnie and her son were visiting us in South Carolina at the time. Isaac and his wife were also staying at my house for part of the time, and my brother was also in town. But he did not stay at my house because he knew I already had a lot of house guests. Suffice it to say, before, during, and after this time, my family heard more about the abuse from witnesses. We were deeply saddened and sickened by what we were hearing. We had more than met the criteria of 2 or 3 witnesses. After my brother returned to Arizona, CPS evidently contacted them again, and things started to get tense between Miriam and her parents. On July 11th, my brother contacted us and told us that he was going to get a plane ticket and have Miriam fly home that day. I was truthful when I initially told him I would take Miriam to the airport, because although Miriam was very upset and terrified, she was initially feeling that she had no choice but to return. Then Miriam approached my wife and me and said that she would not go home because she was terrified and afraid of what her dad would do to her, because he had never been that mad at her. She told us that if we took her to the airport, she would not go home under any circumstance, and she would just disappear from the airport and run away. Given that she had made that decision, I said she could stay with my family, but that I would also have to confront Steve about the abuse. I knew that confronting Steve about the abuse would make it clear to him that Miriam had told us everything, so once that happened, I knew that he would be even more enraged, and it would be even more dangerous for her to go home. So we assured Miriam that we would not make her leave our home. Note, Steve and Juja tried to make it weird that I used the word vow when I said I couldn't go back on my word to let Miriam continue staying at my house. I did not make a formal vow. The reason I use that word is because after I told Miriam that I wasn't going to make her leave, I got a call from Isaac and John because they wanted to make sure I would stick to my guns and not just fold under pressure and send her home to face even worse consequences. So I assured Isaac and John, of course, and Miriam that I would keep my word and not make her go back home unless she chose to go back. Psalm 15 speaks of the man that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. But I was never tempted to back away from my promise anyway, because I knew that protecting Miriam was the right thing to do and what God wanted me to do. Miriam eventually sent a respectful text to her father, letting him know of her decision. I then sent him a text that explained why I was letting her stay and also expressing my great sadness, disappointment, and condemnation of the abuse. That was on July 11th. My brother never responded to my text message, and I did not hear from him again until September 3rd when I saw that I had a missed call from him. The sheriff then showed up at my house that night at approximately 1 a.m. on September 4th. My brother had not given me any warning that he was going to call law enforcement, So from July 11th to September 3rd, he did absolutely nothing to contact me or to try to discuss the situation with his daughter. So if my brother thought I was a bad person, a weirdo, or manipulating his daughter against him, why did he do nothing for over 7 weeks? She had refused to go home on July 11th, but he let her stay at my house for 7 weeks while doing nothing until he suddenly decided to call law enforcement on September 3rd. I think what set Steve off to want to try to get Miriam back was at this time his son John had confronted his parents and then filed a CPS report. So after we finished talking to the sheriff at approximately 2:30 a.m. in the very early morning of September 4th, I texted Steve and said that I was going to call him, but I also told him that he would have to be civil and respectful on the phone or I would end the call. I tried to call him and then he called me right back. When I picked up the phone, I said, "You're on speakerphone with Spring and Miriam." He then immediately said, "First, Clint, go F yourself." He did not use the letter F. He fully enunciated the F word, which is not uncommon for him. At that, I hung up the phone. No, later, when he showed up at my house, he also told my eldest son, his nephew, to go F himself, followed by a tirade of curses. Cursing your brother and nephew in that way is vile. Colossians 3:8, but now ye put off all these, anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouth. So then after many hours, later on in the afternoon of September 4th, Steve showed up at my house, pounded on my door, and demanded that his daughter be given to him in 10 seconds or he would call 911. His daughter was not at my house at that time and was at work at Starbucks inside a Target store. At all points, I fully cooperated with law enforcement. I told them where she was, and they talked to her on the phone and told her to stay at that location, which she did. Evidently, she went into a back room at Target because she was terrified of even seeing her dad, but the police were there and she was literally in police custody. As has been described in Miriam's testimony, an ambulance was called for her and she was taken to the hospital. The police and Steve also went to the hospital. I never saw Miriam at the hospital. My family and I had absolutely nothing to do with her escaping the hospital or any part of her escape plan. We did not provide her any assistance. If we had, she certainly wouldn't have been sleeping in a ditch somewhere, cold and alone without a sweater, and with nothing but the clothes she was wearing. We have not seen Miriam since the morning of September 4th when she left our house to go to her job. We do not know where she is, who she is with, or who helped her get there. We don't even know what state she's living in. I'm not interested in rendering railing for railing or sharing dirt on my brother. I'm sharing the information here because I needed to set the record straight and respond to what he has done and said. It is sick and disgusting that he tried to imply that I was some kind of weirdo or pervert and that I had some kind of inappropriate motive for offering to let Miriam continue staying at our house. He knows these are completely false insinuations as evidenced by his own actions. Why in the past has he let me stay at his house multiple times, let me take his kids on activities, and he himself comes to visit and hang out with me if he really believed that about me? Why did he send his daughter to stay with my family twice if he thought that I was some kind of weirdo? And again, why would he have let her stay for an additional 7 weeks after she refused to initially go home if he thought that I was manipulating her against him? My wife and I are deeply hurt and profoundly disappointed by my brother's words and actions. To try to slander my good name in retaliation because Miriam did an interview is shameful and lower than low. I had nothing to do with any of the videos that his children made. To dox his own brother and put my family at risk is despicable. Also, it was completely and utterly inappropriate to make a video sharing our personal and private medical information. Prior to him releasing this video that doxed me and my family, he issued a threat to me through a family member that if Miriam's interview was released, he would make a video against me. But prior to releasing his video, he had been told by multiple family members that Miriam was not at my house, so he knew that and made his video anyway. Through all this, I still love my brother and feel sorry for him, but I feel infinitely more sorry for his children. We saw God's hand at work so many times through all this. It was God that helped Miriam escape. Since we were doxxed, we have received an outpouring of support from many people across the country. We are grateful for those kind messages. We are deeply appreciative to Solomon, Isaac, John, and my sister Ronnie for speaking up in our defense. My wife and I love Miriam and only want the best for her. It is absurd to say that we were trying to steal her for ourselves when we already had 5 children of our own, including a daughter of our own. My heart breaks for my other nieces and nephews in that home, and my prayer is that Steve and Juja humble themselves, get right with God, and stop abusing their children. Clint Anderson. And so right there, just reading that, it upsets me because of the fact too that just all the things that he's putting himself, his family through, his kids through, his brother through, in reality, just trying to preserve his position. And honestly, when it came to these initial videos and things, I didn't really know what to believe. I'm just going to be honest. I did not completely believe the boys at first when I thought maybe they're exaggerating and stuff. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with Pastor Anderson and he used some bizarre justification of beating your maidservant in the Bible is like justification for striking a woman and things like that. And I realized after that conversation, these guys were not lying in the things that they said. And then when I listened to his sermon about corporal discipline, I couldn't believe he preached that. It was absolutely and completely insane. And so right now I am, and you'll have to bear with me a little bit, I am going to and start inviting some pastors on. So I did send a link to Pastor Major. And so Pastor Major, if you're watching this, I sent it to you through Messenger. The first link I sent you, probably not going to work because I had to switch. I had to change streams. So if you can check that, that would be great. If you're not getting that, send me a text. But in the meantime, and then I'll have him come on there and I have to send everybody a new link that I had sent a link to. But I do want Pastor Major to come on and tell his story. And I do want to say this too about Pastor Major. He preached a message yesterday talking about these things. And Pastor Major, he's somebody who he stepped away from Pastor Anderson several years ago. And I just want to say this, that I am a witness to the fact that when he stepped away from Pastor Anderson, he did everything he possibly could to try to leave quietly, to try to leave honorably. He was not trying to make waves, but it was Pastor Anderson that went public in that whole thing. And even afterwards, I did not immediately separate from Pastor Anderson. I stayed friends with Pastor Major, which upset some people in the new IFB when I did that. But, you know, in all the times I've hung around Pastor Major, he's never felt the need to try to influence me and my thoughts about Pastor Anderson. He never tried to get me to break fellowship with him or anything like that. He handled that completely honorable. But the one thing I learned when Pastor Major got called out during that time is that the only way to get out of the new IFB is feet first. That's all there is to it. Once you get in with them, as soon as you cross them, they are going to throw you under the bus so fast it's not even funny. And I just think that's completely shameful. And so he did. He gave a sharp or a soft rebuke is how he called it in his sermon. And you know what? I say touche. I mean, without a doubt, he was saying a lot of these things before everybody else. And I think he deserves some credit for that. And so I do want to give some pastors an opportunity to just speak and kind of share their thoughts on some of these things. And so Pastor Major, I'm going to have you on here in just a second. If you want to just go ahead, and I'm going to turn it over to you and just say what you have to say. Give your testimony about Pastor Anderson, what got you in the new IFB, but also what got you out at the same time.
Sure. So thank you for having me on here, Pastor McMurtry. But how I kind of got into the new IFB at the very beginning was I was already pastoring the church here, Faith Baptist Church. I've been here for 10 years now. And at that time, the first time I ever heard of Pastor Anderson was when I saw a New World Order Bible version. So I saw that video, didn't know anything about him before that. And so I watched that, thought it was pretty good. And so I started looking just to see if he had some other things out there. And of course, I found After the Tribulation. And then I watched that documentary. And of course, at first, I was your typical IFB pre-tribber at that point. And so at first, it was I didn't agree with it at first. And so after months and months and months of studying and searching the Bible and kind of reading and listening to sermons on both sides, I finally came to the point where I decided and I agreed that Pastor Anderson was right as far as that goes about the pre-trib and all that. And so at that point, then of course the next logical thing that came up was Marching to Zion. And of course, I watched that documentary, and after one domino falls, then the rest of them fall. And so that was just natural. You go from the pre-trib, and that got knocked down, uh, and then I came around on that issue as well with the Jews and so forth. And so those are a couple issues that I think that Pastor Anderson has right. But at that point, once I saw that, kind of what was in my mind and my heart was I kind of felt like I had been lied to all of my life. Because, of course, I grew up independent Baptist. And, of course, being independent Baptist growing up, and pretty much every church is pre-trib, worships the Jews and so forth. And so I kind of felt like I'd been lied to with those things. And so then that kind of in my mind, I guess it elevated Pastor Anderson a little bit higher than what he should have been in my mind. And so then typically I started listening to a lot of his preaching and taking a lot of those things in. And one thing led to another. Eventually I ended up messaging Pastor Anderson, and he came to our church and he showed up, and we did a Soulwinning marathon, and we packed the place out. We saw a lot of people saved.
All right. Hopefully I'm back on. I'm having weird internet problems right here. So I'm going to, Pastor Major, you're going to have to try to rejoin again. We're definitely breaking the internet with this live stream. But yeah, those documentaries that Pastor Anderson put out, they definitely influenced a lot of people. And I'll say this too, with Pastor Major, he was the first pastor I think that I noticed that was not from the, either Faithful Word or Verity. And it kind of helped me feel safer getting involved. So I have to blame him for a lot of these things if I want to try to deflect a little bit. But Pastor Major, I got you back. Go ahead and pick up where you left off.
All right, gotcha. So, yeah, I guess where I left off, trying to remember where I left off. But anyways, I was talking about Pastor Anderson came and did the Soulwinning marathon. Of course, those are good things that we give him credit for, the souls that were saved, the zeal with Soulwinning. And so then, of course, these were the days before the new IFB was called the new IFB. And so then over time, of course, there were more and more preachers that joined up. We did the prophecy conference, which is where I first met Pastor McMurtry. And then just kind of things began blowing up from there. And of course, there was the Red Hot Preaching conferences and all these different conferences. And when things started kind of kicking off, of course, it seemed like I was pretty popular in the new IFB. And so I was preaching all over the place. There were all the churches were having me in or had told me they wanted to have me in. And so I'd preach at Faithful Word, preach at the Prophecy Conference, the conference we did up in Detroit, Steadfast. And so there was all of that going on. But then, of course, most people have probably seen my video I did about 4 years ago. I put out a video why I separated from Stephen Anderson. And in that video, I talked about him joining up with Dane Johansen, with the Calvinist, and I talked about some issues with him promoting a conference he had gone to, and some issues there with the King James. That's why I was separating from Pastor Anderson. And of course, at that time, I had talked to him privately, and I had told him that, of course, these were things I did not agree with, that I could not support, that I could not promote. And so I was going to separate from him privately. This was a private conversation I had with him on the phone. And I told him, I'm not going to come out and attack you. I'm not going to come out and put out a YouTube video against you. I'm not going to call other pastors. I was just going to.
All right. For some reason, I think I'm just overloading my computer tonight. So I'm going to have to, I'm closing every window that there is. And so hopefully Pastor Major will be able to get reconnected again. There we go. He's back. All right, go right back.
Off where Anderson, of course, I separated from Anderson, told him that I wasn't going to attack him. I wasn't going to go out and make a video against him. But then, of course, he went out and he does what he typically does. When somebody does not agree with him, then all of a sudden they are not his friends. He does not know how to agree to disagree. And so he went out and he made a video against me and a few other preachers, Pastor Perry and Pastor Johnson. He made a video attacking us. And of course, at the Red Hot Preaching Conference, he got up in the pulpit and he attacked preachers that had called him out for, not in public, but called him out privately about the Calvinism issue. And in that conference, of course, he got up and there were things that he lied about. And so at that time, before that, I'd already been